Hello, I am Priyadarshini Karve from India. For several years now, I have been working on sustainable urbanization. I entered into this field through my work in renewable energy, but very soon I realized that water is an important driver of urban sustainability. And I'm going to share some of my ponderings, my thoughts on this issue in the next few minutes. So I will be specifically talking about water issues in the context of cities, and that too cities of the developing world. But before getting into that, I want to state a few facts about water that I'm sure everyone is aware of, but we don't often think of all of these things together. And if we do, we will realize that water is really a very unique resource that our planet is providing us. One thing we have to realize that water is an alien on planet Earth. There is no location on Earth where water is created. It has arrived on the planet in the form of icy comets, which kept bombarding the young planet Earth in its formative period. But it came in such huge quantities that today we know that water covers nearly 70% of the Earth's surface. It doesn't even flow only on the surface, but it also is under the Earth's surface, and it's a prominent part of our atmosphere. Although on a planetary scale, this is a finite resource, locally one can think of it as a renewable resource, and that is because water gets distributed around the planet through the water cycle. Another important thing to remember is that water is life. Life originated and evolved underwater, and living organisms have lived longer in water rather than on land. We humans are made of nearly 60% water. Our civilizations have thrived near water bodies, and also when the water changed course, the civilizations collapsed. Today, the modern human civilization, for which the global trade is an important driver, this relies heavily on transport via water, via oceans. So water in this sense is very unique, very precious. Now, if we think of water in the context of cities, historically we know that cities have grown around natural water bodies. They have used these local water bodies as a source of water for meeting a variety of needs, as a means of carrying away waste from the city, and also to some extent as a means of mobility, of moving around. At the same time, we also know that various types of waterfronts, beaches, river sides or lake sides, these are important places from cultural, recreational, and also commercial perspective. Particularly if we think about cities in the developing world today, these cities are facing a number of water related challenges. Some of this is linked with where the water is coming from and how it is coming, and some are related with what is happening to water after it gets utilized for various purposes. So on the input side, we know that the city's local water supply is now not enough to satisfy the requirements of these expanding cities. These sources are both above ground as well as underground. But as the cities are expanding, the populations are increasing, and new functionalities are getting added. For example, high-rise shopping malls is a relatively new phenomenon, especially in the cities of the developing world. So as these new functionalities come in, new demands for water also come in. And then the city starts extracting water from places which are beyond its limits. That creates a tension between a city and its surrounding area. So these have been sort of flashpoints of conflict around these growing cities. On the output side, as we use more water in the cities, more wastewater is getting generated. The city administrations do try to put in place mechanisms for treating this water before releasing it into the environment. However, these efforts are always falling behind the rate at which the wastewater generation keeps on increasing. It's not just the volume of the wastewater that is creating a challenge, but the composition of the wastewater is also changing. In olden days, the wastewater coming out of a city would primarily be domestic sewage water, and the pollutants would basically be organic materials. However, now, because of this diverse functionalities within a city, there are also industries, there are businesses, and even in our day-to-day lives, we are using a variety of chemical-based products. We are using cleansing chemicals, we are using cosmetics, soaps, detergents. All of these have harmful chemicals which ultimately end up in the wastewater, and therefore the composition of the wastewater coming out of the city is also changing, and that creates another layer of challenge for how to deal with this wastewater. Along with these issues, which are really related with developmental choices, lifestyle choices, city planning choices, another dimension is coming in now because of climate change. There is now uncertainty in water availability because rain pattern across the world is changing. So when a city is extracting water from surrounding areas by taking water away from some other functions, some other communities, and at the same time, if there is uncertainty as to when the next rain is going to come, when the water source will get replenished, that sort of sharpens the conflict between the city and the surrounding areas to share to the amount of water that is available. Another thing that is happening because of climate change, there is something called urban heat island effect. When there is a lot of concrete infrastructure in one location in a city, that area tends to have 1 or 2 degrees centigrade higher temperature than the surrounding areas. And now, because of climate change in a lot of the developing world, the ambient temperature itself is increasing. So the heat island effect is over and above that, and that starts approaching almost heat waves, at least for some time during the year. And whenever there is more heat, there is a higher demand for water. Because of the changes in the rain pattern, especially in India, we are experiencing this a lot now, that there is a lot of rain, but it comes in a very short duration. And when that happens in a densely populated, densely constructed city, it is a huge risk of flooding and waterlogging. And this problem becomes more serious because there is also wastewater which has not been treated, which gets mixed up in this rainwater, which is flooding and waterlogging. And that creates a big health hazard. And of course, for cities which are close to the marine coasts, there is now an increased risk of cyclones, which is also related with the local water body, so to say. So, in view of all of this, how should cities manage their water? What are the solutions? There is actually, and obviously, no single silver bullet solution. There are a number of things that we can do, either at the level of the communities or at the level of the city administrators. One thing which I feel must be prioritized is rainwater harvesting. As the city is extracting a lot of water from its surroundings and also groundwater, it's important that as much of the rainwater as possible is captured, and at least the groundwater can be recharged. So this will ease some of the pressure on the water resources, not just for the city but also for the surrounding areas. We also need to relook at the way building permissions are being given and infrastructure is being planned in the cities. Because if we are putting obstacles in water flows, both above and below ground, we are increasing the risk of flooding and waterlogging. Now, the above ground part, many people do understand, see, and are even working on. The below ground part, I think, needs to be highlighted particularly here, because a lot of the city infrastructure is now going underground to save space. And we are building underground tunnels, there are underground roads, trains, even buildings have underground basements. All of these are basically cutting through the aquifers. Now, what impact that is going to have if there is a huge rain and a lot of water is trying to percolate down? We don't really know that. So it's important that this hydrogeological component also comes into play for urban planning in cities. Another important thing which needs to be done is decentralizing the wastewater treatment and recycling the wastewater locally. This will sort of spread out the challenge, and it will allow the city administration to deal with this problem in small packets, which in itself will ease the way forward. Because if at a certain cluster level, if wastewater is getting treated, then this is less space intensive, less energy intensive, and also then locally the water, treated water, becomes available for gardening, for toilet flushing, and so on. So this is how wastewater treatment and recycling needs to be planned. Another thing which can be done is to promote toxin free cleansers, cosmetics, etc., to reduce the chemical load going into the wastewater, even from the domestic sector. This will have a spin-off positive effect of creating a new ecosystem of local entrepreneurs who are providing these type of substitute products. Apart from this, there are ways in which one can use water flows to counter the heat island effect. So this could be natural water flows, or even wastewater can be used intelligently and smartly to cool down the concrete infrastructure. Urban planners need to go back to the drawing board and re-look at how the water bodies within a city are flooding now in the face of the changed pattern of rain. Flood lines may have to be redrawn, especially around these water bodies, how the land is put to use. The norms may have to be reframed. This has to be a response to the climate change impacts that must come from city administrators. Water supply to different parts of the urban uh, system should also be based on fairness and science. Many times, especially in the developing world, we see in cities certain areas get a lot of water supply and other areas are deprived. This must be avoided. And also, we know international norms exist that one needs about 135 liters of water per person per day to meet basic needs. So the water allocation in the domestic sector should be based on this formula. And up to that level, water should be available and accessible to everyone at either no cost or very low cost. But any excess water use must be charged at a high price. Similarly, for different business establishment, academic campuses, industries within the city, uh, we need to figure out what is a scientific allotment of water that that particular establishment needs to keep its operations going at an efficient level. Once that determination is made, then for these establishments also some kind of a formula can be worked out that an appropriate amount of water will be made available at a low cost. Any excess water usage will have to be charged heavily. With the help of smart metering and smart data management, these kind of customized systems can be put in place. Finally, we really need to think about how big we want our cities to grow. Is it really wise to have one huge big mega city versus having a lot of smaller satellite cities around maybe a major metropolis? The expansion of a city should be governed by water availability considerations more than anything else, according to me. So these are some of the ideas that have come from the work that we are doing in India. Of course, this is not a complete list. There may be other solutions, and depending on location, a different set of solutions will make sense. So this is this the thinking has to be the same, that we want to as much as possible reduce the city's dependence on external water sources, and to do that, we should use the available water as efficiently as possible, recharge the groundwater and refill the water bodies to the best extent possible. And the wastewater must be treated, recycled, rather than just throwing it out into the environment in an untreated form. So if these basic principles are followed, then I believe it is possible for cities to tackle the water challenge. Thank you very much.